They don't want to fund because it's the same amount of work, only there's no money in it for them on a low-end mortgage. So there's this hole where the sellers can't sell because the buyers need financing, the seller needs cash, so we just get in the middle. We get in the middle. We give them their cash and we give them their financing.
You're listening to Ice Cream with Investors, a podcast that is dedicated to teaching you how to better invest your money so that you can live a more intentional life. I'm your host, Matt Four, and it is my goal to teach and empower you to remove the roadblocks to your financial success.
Well, we like to start with the difficult questions here. What's your favorite ice cream?
What's my favorite ice cream? I'm going to have to give you two answers there, Matt. I'm sorry about that, but I got to give you two answers because my favorite ice cream is going to be chocolate chip mint. But the reason I got to give you two answers is because if I'm at Ben & Jerry's, it's Chunky Monkey. Anywhere else in the world, it's chocolate chip mint, but Ben & Jerry's, I've been Chunky Monkey ever since I'm about 13 years old.
Got it. Well, you live in the Virginia Beach area, which has got to have some good ice cream. So if we make our way that way, where's the best ice cream we can find over near your neck of the woods?
Well, we do have Ben & Jerry's ice cream shops out here at the beach. We also have Core Brothers. I don't know if it's frozen custard. They're from Ocean City, Maryland, I think originally, and they're really good if you like frozen custard.
Are they on the boardwalk there
in
Virginia Beach? Okay,
yep.
Gotcha. Well, Scott, tell our listeners, what's the scoop? What do you do today?
So I do lots of different things, but my main thing that I do and that I've been building on is what we call slow flips. And it's a strategy I started in 2011 after long trials and tribulations. We'll talk about that after. But where we buy houses like a car, and by that I mean we buy them on short-term financing, 5 years, like a car payment would be. But yet we sell them like a house, meaning on a 30-year mortgage. So we buy them like a car, we sell them on a house. I don't renovate, I don't rehab. The value that we provide is in the financing. That's my main business. I have 178 of them right now, and I have 79 of them are free and clear, and they'll all be free and clear within a 5-year time frame because they're all on some level of 60 months or less left.
Yeah, I did a lot of research beforehand, and I'm super interested in your model. But before we get there, you actually got started in real estate back in 1994. So take us back to those days. How did you get started?
So my very first house, my first house I bought in 1994, and I was about to say, you're not old enough to remember, but there was a thing back then called non-qualifying assumptions, and you probably never even heard that term before. So they did away with them in 1987 for FHA and 89 for VA, but what it meant was anybody can take over your mortgage at any given time with the bank's blessing, and you just paid out the owner his equity or whatever you agreed on. And it basically like a sub-2 does now, except with the bank's blessing. Now the banks don't know about them when you do a sub-2, right? And so there was a property, my brother found a flyer and sent it to me. I was mowing lawns at the time, and it was $5,000 down and $675 a month for a townhouse. And so I had $5,000. It was non-qualifying, and I'm like I always say, I could not qualify as good as anyone, right? I had, I worked for myself mowing lawns. I had no credit. So I purchased this house, and I had no interest in real estate. But then about 2-3 weeks after I moved into it, another house on the block came for sale, and there was a white sign, magic marker in front that said $2,000 down, take over payments. And I got pissed because I was like, damn it, they got me. I just paid $5,000 down. And mind you, I know it sounds stupid because I didn't know anything about the values. I didn't know anything about equity. I didn't know anything about the work. I knew nothing about anything other than mine was $5,000 down and this one was $2,000 down. So my genius brain decided, well, let's buy that one also, right? And the figure I'll cost average out to $3,500 each. And so I did that. And that was the first time I ever started to think about real estate because every month I put a tenant in there, and every month the tenant would pay me and I would pay the mortgage. And I kept always thinking, I borrowed this money and they're paying it off. I borrowed it, they're paying it off. And it became an obsession of mine. Buy as many as I can. I didn't have a job, I didn't have mortgageability, but back then you can get non-qualifying assumptions. Much like I sell now, same type of thing, no credit and just pay a down payment and rent them out. And so I became crazy obsessed with it, and I never looked back.
Why do you think they got rid of non-qualified assumptions?
I think the reason they did is because rates. Because now, like if they did it, let's suppose they still had it, those 2% and 3% rates that they gave out these last couple of years would be in existence for 30 years. Where the average American, I think the statistic is, it used to be 5 years, I think it's like 3.5 years now. They say the average American moves, which means even though they gave out those rates, odds are they're not going to be around for that long. But if it was still non-qualifying, that rate, nobody's ever going to pay that off, right? It would stay in existence. So I think, and they make more money, I think, I don't know the banking industry too well, but I think they make more money on their origination, selling off the loans, than actually servicing it long term. So I think that was probably what led to it.
I was going to say origination fees. So for our listeners out there that might not know, when you go to Bank of America and you get a loan, they underwrite the loan, they charge a fee on it, and then they just sell it back to a Fannie and Freddie. So they don't really even care after they get their little fee up front. And if you have an assumption, then obviously they're not in the middle of that, and they want to find a way to put themselves in the middle of a transaction.
Right.
So you bought these 2 houses. Did you end up scaling your portfolio? Talk to us a little bit about how you scaled your portfolio.
Yeah, so I became obsessed, right? And back then, this is a long time ago. Back then, your deals were in the Saturday newspaper. We didn't have the internet going on. So every Saturday is when the real estate section came out, and I'd go through them and I would circle the non-qualifying assumptions: 2,000 down, 5,000 down, some as cheap as 500 down, right? People just want it out. And then I became obsessed with trying, and I didn't have any money, so I'm saving, coming up with as much as I can, one at a time. And I got to about 20 properties by 2001. So I started in 94. By 2001, I had 20. And in 2001 was the very first time since I started, and actually even since the mid-'80s, that we started having appreciation. And the reason I know that is because I was buying these in 94, 96, 97, 98 for the same price they bought them for in 85, 86. But in 2001, all of a sudden, my $65,000 townhouses were now 90 and 110. And so I started trying to learn now, and I'm going to real estate classes and seminars and reading books, and everybody taught that what I was doing was foolish, right? That you need to refi, pull out that equity, and use that money to buy more. And so I did what everyone taught to do, which was I refied all my properties, and I turned my 20 houses into 84 houses. And I had 84 houses, and I had 84 mortgages. And, and I was rocking and rolling, and we were doing really good until 2007. And, I know everybody always says it was 2008, and I'm like, I assure you it was 2007. I still have my QuickBooks. I assure you it was 2007. And maybe it didn't make the news till 2008, but it was 2007. And in 2007, I had probably 40% of my people stopped paying overnight. And it wasn't that they were bad people. Everybody was losing their jobs. I mean, it was a rough time in the economy, and I had 84 mortgages. And so I had a lot of money saved at the time, almost $1 million in cash, and I fought the good fight. And when I ran out of money, I lost 55 of my houses to foreclosure. And, and that's rough on anybody, right? But it's especially rough. I'm driving an Escalade with big stop foreclosure on the side of it, so it was rough because I'm the guy that stops foreclosures. And then I had to, revamp and pivot and change directions and figure out what I did right, what I did wrong, what other people were doing. Because most people went out of business, went back to their jobs, right? They went back to IBM or wherever they were working before the boom. I didn't have that luxury because I mowed lawns before the boom, and then there were still people who were crushing it. They were flourishing during this downtime, and so I started paying attention. What are they doing different? And that's kind of what spawned off the slow flip from paying attention to what other people were doing.
How did you unwind? You mentioned 84 to 55. How did you unwind those 30 properties there?
No, I lost 55 to foreclosure. They didn't get unwound. The bank took them back.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Did you try to wholesale them or get rid of them?
No, it was impossible, and that's why. This is why I'm really always cautious on people. There's so many stuff being taught today that people that started anytime from 2008 to today, which is a long time. I talk about it like it was yesterday. Somebody the other day was like, Scott, that was 15 years ago. Like, calm down. That was a long time ago, and to me, it's yesterday. You couldn't sell them, and the reason is, let me give you for instance. I might have had a property that I owed $200,000 on. When they were all getting crushed, the banks were going out of business left and right, so it was really hard to get a mortgage. But the ones that could, they were selling now for 120, 110, but I still owed 200. I have some actual to give you real numbers, because so many times people are like, no, the market only went down 30%. I'm like, no, the retail market might have went down 30%. I have specific houses that I owned, and I owed, I'm going to tell you a scenario of one house in my head right now. I owed $150,000 on it. When I bought it for $120. It appraised at $199, and the bank loaned me $150 because they gave me an 80% mortgage. That's one of the houses that got foreclosed on. I bought that same house again from the bank. That house, not the one like it, that actual house, and I still own it today. I bought it for $30,000.
Wow.
And so some people are like, oh no, houses went down 20%. I said, no, they didn't. It might have been the retail market went down 20% or 30%, but no. I bought that house was appraised at $199, and I bought it as an REO for $30,000, and I still own it today.
Wow. Well, before we get into the slow flip, I just kind of looking back on it, there's a lot of folks that hear horror stories like that and get nervous about investing in real estate and things like that. What are some of the key learnings that you took from that you would have done differently knowing what you know now?
Debt. I followed that the age old advice that everyone teaches and still teaches about leverage and how much more money you make by using the leverage model, and I regret it. And if I was able to, and my advice, and this is what was advised on me, is you have to get in debt. That's part of life. It's part of business. That unless you have $10 billion to start with, you're going to get in debt. But I regret getting in too much debt. I regret, even people say, oh, keep it at 80%. I'm like, screw 80%. I'm a free and clear guy, but I still got to be in debt because you buy new houses and you can't, unless you have 10 million, you're still going to be getting in debt. But I try and pay them off as fast as possible. And like with the slow flip program we do now, we pay off all our houses within 5 years. And so that to me is 5 years is still 5 years. You have debt. However, it's over. Once it's over for good. And so that's my biggest thing. My biggest takeaway was, and that's kind of why I got into teaching. It's funny when you say that, Matt, is after the bust, when the seminars finally started coming back, I couldn't wait to go to see what they were teaching now. Because I'm like, well, obviously we know everything they were teaching didn't work. So let's see what they're teaching now. And I was shocked that they were teaching the same thing. I'm like, but you already know that there's a flaw in this. Now, mind you, the flaw may never happen again. I may just sound like a crazy person because it's been 15 years and it may be another 50 years, right? Then nothing ever happens. And everybody who's using leverage is working out fantastic and they all make $1 bazillion and say Scott was crazy. And it's very possible. I just feel I'm too old to start over again. So I go the secure, not leveraged model where I just pay them off.
Yeah, you're going with the get rich slow plan, which there's nothing wrong with because you can still end up rich.
Exactly it. I am definitely going with the not get rich to tomorrow, but let's wait 5 years and then have freedom forever.
Yep. Now, you mentioned the slow flip a couple times. So can you walk us through what is the slow flip?
So I'll tell you that exact house that I'm talking about, that house I told you about that I still have, because this is kind of how stuff got originated. That house was available for $30,000, and not just available, but nobody was buying it. And I'm like, I'm the one who renovated it. I know what's in there, right? It was appraised at $199, but I couldn't buy it because I was dead to the banks. I had all these houses got foreclosed on. There was no retail market for a good year and a half. There was almost no retail market, and so I had to borrow private money. But I didn't want to borrow hard money because hard money requires you got 6 months, you got to sell it. So I was coming up with a program to basically get a mortgage on it. However, everybody I talk to about a mortgage wants to do 30 years. And I'm like, it's $30,000. I bought a car for $30,000 and it was 5 years. How come I got to buy a house? It's got to be 30 years. And so we came up with a program to where we buy it like a car, where I do them on 5-year mortgages. And all of our houses are bought on 5-year mortgages. But then I instantaneously, and this is the second side to the slow flip, I instantaneously sell it with long-term owner financing. So that very house I bought for the 30 on a 5-year mortgage, but I turned around and sold it again at the $199, the same price that it appraised for 2 years prior, but $199, but with owner financing. So they didn't have to get a mortgage, they didn't have to qualify. They gave me $5,000 down, and at the time they were only giving me $875 a month. They still are because they're there, but at that same house, if it was to have turned over, now it would be probably $1,400 a month. But they pay me $875 a month. But if you do the math, $875 a month for 30 years comes out to $315,000. I only bought it for 30, and I didn't pay a dollar for it because the private lender paid the whole thing, and they paid off the private lender. So it's a free house to me. I have 178 of those now. So I mean, if you can do the math on how they add up, I have 79 of them are free and clear. And it changes everything. The freedom aspect of it changes everything, where I used to have to go out every month and get deals to be able to make it to next month and get more deals. And now it's just a matter of managing payments. That's all we do. We're not managing tenants. We're managing just payments. That's it.
Yeah, Kiyosaki talks about in his book, like, rich people don't own things, they control things. And I think this is a perfect example of, technically, you don't own the house, right? Like, you've got it on a seller. Well, you own it until the seller pays it off, I guess.
Right.
But the seller is ultimately the buyer of that house.
Correct.
Sorry, the buyer is the buyer of the house. They're going to end up owning the property, but you're controlling the financing and making the spread in the middle.
Correct. We invent money, and then we charge interest on that money, but we collect real payments every month on it, which is, it's awesome.
So obviously you've heard this before. Scott, $30,000 house, that's impossible. I live in Los Angeles, California. Where are you finding $30,000 houses these days? Where are you finding your leads and those sorts of things?
So I only hear that about 300 or 400 times a day. But the reality is, and it's funny, I just had an argument with somebody online. Not an argument, but he said that basically that I'm out of my mind, you can't buy them. And I made a video for him showing, I said, if you spent 10 seconds Googling instead of arguing, you would have seen. And I just went on Zillow and typed in a state under 30,000, and there was like 170 available. So in California, not possible. Oregon, not possible. Washington State, not possible. New York, it is possible. Not in upstate New York, it is possible, but we wouldn't do it anyway because we only buy in landlord-friendly states. And so I'm in 4 different states, and I have, in the Midwest states, I probably have 50, 52, 53 houses. I've never seen one of them. I've never, other than pictures, I've never gone to see them. I don't inspect them. I'll have somebody go and do pictures and video, and then I'll have somebody market it and we fill it. But I don't see the houses. Everybody's like, well, I can't do it in my market. In my market, you can't buy a garage for $30,000, let alone a house, right? And I agree. And the majority of my houses are in my local market, but we can't really buy them much anymore because our market's come up so much, right? I started doing this in 2011, and they were abundant. I wish I was more aggressive back then, but I probably have 130, 140 in my market, or 120 in my market. But I still buy some. I bought 2 this past month in my market, but it's harder and harder to find them. But there's so many states. I mean, I'm thinking about students in my program. They're doing it in Ohio, in Alabama, Indiana, Kentucky, Missouri, Illinois. There's a ton of states. Oklahoma, they do it. In Texas, they do it. And it's amazing how many houses are in the world. Because if you just say 30,000, like, people have this vision in their head of 4 sheets of plywood and a tarp on it, right? What can you get for 30 grand? Just the land shouldn't be 30 grand. And then when you look at some of these videos, you're like, holy crap, there's hardwood floors. There's how is this thing 30 grand? But they're there. Mine is not to ask how or why, just to know that it's in fact there.
Yeah, I mean, I follow a Instagram account that's like cheap old houses, and it's basically they highlight houses under $100,000, which, I recognize $30,000 is different than $100,000. But to your point, I mean, there's a lot of that are like $20,000, and they're just kind of in the middle of nowhere, and they're a beautiful house, looks like it functions well.
So there's a hole in the marketplace, and they're not even in the middle of nowhere. Like I have a lot in a town called Cahokia in Illinois, and I drove out. I was in there for a meeting. I was in St. Louis for a meeting, and I said, let me go drive by and see what this town even looks like, because I already had like 35 out there. I said, let me drive by and see this town. It's a nice town, and I did videos, and I was like, this is a nice, decent-looking place. It wasn't in the middle of nowhere. The challenge is there's a hole in the marketplace, and that hole is the sellers need cash to sell, but the buyers need financing to buy. But most banks don't want to fund a $20,000, $30,000 mortgage. Most of them have like a $50,000 minimum, and they don't want to fund because it's the same amount of work, only there's no money in it for them on a low end mortgage. So there's this hole where the sellers can't sell because the buyers need financing, the seller needs cash. So we just get in the middle. We get in the middle. We give them their cash and we give them their financing.
So let's. That's the house that you're looking for. Where do you find your private lenders? Talk us through that part of it.
So that's the whole trick to the whole business, because everybody's like, oh, well, that's great. You just said you're paying cash, but what if you don't have the cash? It's all about private lenders. And so I teach a method for it, but the short version is, and every time I say this, they're like, yeah, well, that's easy for you. I don't know anybody. I always tell people you start with friends and family, even though most of the time that's not going to be where your lenders come from. But we start there because, first off, it gets you comfortable with your pitch. Second off, we don't ever ask anybody to lend us money. So I'm going to tell you, and I don't know how much time you have, Matt, but I'm going to tell you kind of the basis of how I train for raising private money. Number one is we never ask, we offer. We offer an opportunity. We never ask, right? And on top of that, we don't offer it to the person we're talking to. We offer it to them. Do they know somebody who might be interested in making 12% secured by real estate? And because of the way we do it, we take away the ability to get rejected. And because that ability to be rejected is gone, it takes away the fear of rejection, which is usually what stops people from talking to people. Because they say, well, I know they don't have any money anyway, so why am I going to bother? They're just going to tell me no. But when you do it this way, they can't tell you no because you didn't ask them. And you maintain the power position, because now it ends with them going, well, tell me about it. I might be interested. And then you're like, no, not you. You're doing Bitcoin or whatever you're doing, right? Not you, but you know other people, until they're like, no, tell me, I might. And then you can tell them about it.
Yeah, and at the very least, they might think of somebody that's in their network and be like, I'm not the guy, but talk to Scott.
Right, exactly, and it started you down that path, and not like the Cutco Knives Guy dudes, right? That they go one off to the next, to the next, to the next. Every single one of my lenders I have now stemmed from my first lender, all the way in 2011. They all came from another lender who, what are they talking about at a party they go to? How much they're making on their investments, right? And he's like, well, this guy Scott's been paying me 12% for 6 years. Can you see if he needs any new guys, and if he needs any more money? And then I get a text or a call. Hey, my friend Joe wants to do some lending. Are you looking for anybody else? And it just one after the other comes from the same pool of people.
So we got your house, we've got your private lenders. Now, where are you finding your buyers of your homes then?
So the buyers are abundant. We find them basically the same way everybody finds them. We find them through handwritten, poorly written signs, and I'll tell you about that in a second, and Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist. And we sell, owner will finance, no credit check, $5,000 down, $875 a month. There is an abundance of buyers because they don't have a choice between these 10 houses. They have a choice between your house or renting. That's it, because there's not an abundance of availability of people that are offering a program like we're offering. So we typically, our vacancies in the East Coast properties last anywhere between a couple hours to a day. And in the Midwest properties, I probably about 2 weeks to 3 weeks out there of them sitting vacant before they get occupied.
Gotcha. So when you buy these homes, it sounds like you have a list of buyers in your potential database that you can slide in there immediately. So these aren't really sitting vacant for long. And more importantly, it doesn't sound like you're doing any rehab to these as well.
We're doing no rehab. We don't even clean them up. We don't do anything. But something I didn't tell you, Matt, is the majority of our buyers are investors. They are investors who are the way I used to be. They're buying what they can buy with financing. If it's $3,000 down or $5,000 down, they're buying as conventional rentals for 30 years, and they're renting it to somebody else, collecting the payment every month, and mailing it to the bank. And we're the bank. And so the majority are investors. My number one investor with me has been with me over 10 years now. He's got 13 properties with me. And then I have a ton that have 5 and 6 properties. And they're constantly texting, let me know when you get another one. I'm ready for another one. And that's my favorite. Those are my favorite people because they're renovating them. They're renting them. Most of them do Section 8 or they do some kind of rooming house or they do a government program. But they're making good money. We're making good money. And everybody wins.
So are there any regulations around this? It almost sounds like a wrap in that sense.
It's not a wrap. We do it on an agreement for deed. There are regulations there's Dodd-Frank. So if you're selling to homeowners, you're limited to 3 per year per entity. If you're selling to investors, there's no regulation. Now, you can do more than 3 per year per entity if you put them through underwriting, which we don't because we primarily sell to investors anyway. And when you sell to investors, there's no regulation.
Gotcha. Now, so will you actually own the home? Let me start there. Do you own the home and you're selling it back?
When we purchase the home, the deed goes in our name, and then when we sell it, the deed stays in our name until they pay it off.
Gotcha.
So the way I explain it, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
The way I explain it to the buyers when they're asking, oh, what's the difference between this or if I got a mortgage? The way I explain it is I tell them, if you got a mortgage with Bank of America, the deed goes in your name and then you pay for 30 years. When you get a house from us, you pay for 30 years and then the deed goes in your name. It's the exact same end result.
Gotcha. Now, do you, the owner, not your buyer, have to have insurance, and how are you making sure they're paying for insurance, the buyer is paying for insurance?
So you're going to say this is stupid. I double insure my properties for the first 5 years. And the reason is, and I know it's stupid, I'll tell you why it's stupid, because you can only make one claim. There's 2 policies, you can only make one claim. So it is a waste. But the reason I do it, our buyers get their own policy. So they're able to get a homeowner's policy based on our contract. The reason I get a policy also is because in the first 5 years, we have a lender. And if your buyer doesn't make their payment or they're getting ready to not pay, they automatically send out a letter to the lien holder. Well, I don't want my lender to get that letter. So that's why I pay for it, just to keep the peace of mind for my lender. My lenders have 1,000% peace of mind. And even though you can pay it and stop it, I don't want, if my buyer didn't pay their insurance on time, I don't want my lender to receive that letter. So I pay another policy just to keep my lender satisfied and protected and never get that letter.
Gotcha. Second question on that is, how do you make sure that the buyer is paying the property taxes on it?
Because we pay it. We learned the hard way. Yeah, in the beginning, I used to have them pay it, and guess what? They don't pay it.
So do you bake that into your
into
selling
the payment?
agreement?
Yeah, we work it into the payment.
Okay, gotcha. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
What am I missing here? Where are some of the pitfalls you've learned? Because I mean, this sounds really, really interesting to me. Where are the challenges?
Well, one of the big challenges, you have to secure the private lenders, because without the private lenders, then you're no different than I always reference this guy as 2005 Scott, which is old me, right? You're trying to buy anything you can with owner financing. If you don't have the private money secured, then you need the funding just like your buyers do now. So you're in a different position. Another big pitfall is being too passive. And what I mean by that is we try and be strict in a positive way, because people, if payments are due on the 1st and they go late on the 5th, right? And then you're supposed to file, at least in the markets I'm in, by the 15th. But I know people that have been like, well, but they say they next month this and next month that. And next thing you know, they're $5,000 behind before they have a file. Well, you kind of did them a disservice by being passive, because now they can't come up with the money. It's so much money. But if you were strict and you said, nope, on the 15th I'm filing, don't worry, I'll cancel it before I court as long as you pay. But you file just to start that clock. Now they still only have to come up with $900, and they can do that. And so I think that's one of the biggest things I've seen people where they get themselves into a bind, is where they try and work with people. And mind you, I work with people too, but you have to still put it on a calendar. Start the clock ticking, because if you don't, you're going to be hurting them, because it's going to be so deep now they can't get out of it.
Yep, got it. We talked about insurance, how you handle the taxes. What other documents would I need if I was going to pursue something like this?
Basically, the agreement for deed is a big thing, and we've customized. I had a lawyer work on it for a while, and basically I told him, I said, I want you to write this up as if you're going to court to defend it. And so I had him write up a really good one with a ton of disclaimers, because I want them protected, and I want us protected. And I tell them, I said, as long as you make your payment, you will never see me again. It's their house. The only time you ever hear from us again is if you are delinquent. And so you need a really good agreement for deed. We're in multiple states, so we've had to redo them in multiple states to make it really good for each state, compliant with that state's law. Barring that, when you're borrowing private money, there's going to be a note and deed of trust, but you don't prepare that. Your attorney, whoever's doing the closing, is going to prepare that for them. And there's not a whole lot of documents you're going to need.
Got it. So talk us through Master Investor Academy. You've started a cohort to help people learn this strategy. Why'd you start it? What do I get out of the program? Talk to us a little bit about that.
So I started it in 2015 is when I started doing coaching and training, and it started just live and local. I did live events here locally, and I actually grew to really like it a lot, but I was only doing local, and it became overwhelming, because everybody I had in my local market, we had over 170 people in my local market that I was working with, and now we're almost cannibalizing, because we're going after the same deals, and I'm going on appointments with them, and I'm selling them, and so just recently I've changed to where I haven't done a live event now since May of last year, and I started doing an online program which is called the Freedom Accelerator program, which now it's national. And I've really been enjoying this a lot, because we get people, much like you said, in my market we can't find houses for this price, but then we also have people that live in these markets that where they are for that price, and so it's really been working out well within the group, because some people that live in these markets that other people that are in California are buying in, now they're working together and filling them and putting out the signs for them and collaborating on deals. So it's really been good. I've been enjoying it a lot. We've only started this program online in January of this year, and it's been fantastic. I've really been enjoying it.
Yeah. I always like asking this question too. When you've been involved in real estate now for, doing some public math, close to 30 years. A lot of talk right now in recession and interest rates, geopolitical, et cetera. How do you view the real estate market now, and what are some of the things that, if I'm a first-time investor or first-time getting involved in real estate, that I should be thinking through?
So as far as the market itself, everybody's like, what's going to happen? Is it going to crash? Is it going to keep going up and this and that? I believed, going into the end of last year, I believed 2023 we were going into a downturn. I firmly believed it, and it's still shooting up and nothing's changed. So the way I answer that question typically to most people is I tell them, I said, we're all going to find out at the exact same time, and it's going to be a day after it happens. We're all going to find out. And it may not happen. We just don't know. because they prop up everything. It may not happen for another 10, 20 years. It may not happen, period. We just don't know. But I will tell you, we're all going to find out at the same time. All the talking heads on TV, all the people that want to share their opinions on the internet, we're all making it up. The real answer is we're going to find out a day after it happened. The other thing, when you mentioned political and stuff and that, one of the things that's interesting that happened recently is during COVID, we really had a taste of we don't really own anything. As much as I'm even free and clear, it was amazing that the government was able to tell us they don't have to pay and you can't do anything about it. And I'm like, but the law. And they said, nah, the law. And that was interesting. And so that part does make me a little nervous that the government had a taste of. We told them what to do and they did it. And so now, who knows what'll happen next. But, you can't, at least my opinion, Matt, is you can't worry about stuff like that. You gotta, you make your own future, and yes, stuff's going to change, and we'll change with it, and life will go on.
Yeah, and control what you can control. And at the end of the day, I mean, I believe that all real estate goes up and to the right as long as you give it enough time. I can't tell you how long of a time you have to get it. And trust me that if your real estate property goes to zero, that you have much bigger problems out there to worry about than that property.
Yeah, I agree with you 1,000%. I mean, because in the end, they have to have a place to live. And even if people are like, oh, but the government's going to take, I said, even if the government was to take someone's real estate, they're going to pay for it. So, I don't see any of that happening. But again, it's all the talking heads, and we'll all find out a day after it happens.
Yep, I like that.
I don't see risk in real estate. That to me is, there's a lot of risky things out there, and real estate, now there is risk. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. I don't see risk as real estate as your investment. There is risk in investing improperly in real estate, but as far as owning real estate, I don't see risk in it.
Yep. Well, Scott, fantastic conversation. I want to switch us now to our last round. We're calling this the 5 toppings. Our first one is, what is your favorite book, or what is a book you've read recently that's given you a paradigm shift?
So I read a lot of books, but one of the ones, if you're going to ask my favorite, one of the few books I've read multiple times because I just enjoy it, and I know you've read it, everybody's read it, is The 4-Hour Workweek. I really enjoy The 4-Hour Workweek, and I think one of the reasons I enjoy it so much, I remember when it first came out, it just was a different way of thinking. And a lot of my life is adopted from that, where I basically am all about freedom, and I don't work much anymore at all. Like, I'm lucky if I go a couple hours a week, and I have a pretty awesome, unbelievable life. But it was because I stopped chasing to make the most money possible and started chasing just to have the best life possible. And I equate a lot of that to The 4-Hour Workweek. I enjoyed that book a lot.
Yeah, it changed the way I think about things for sure. Our second one is, I believe the person you become 10 years from now is directly correlated to the habits that you have and the things you do every day. What are some of the habits that you have?
So it almost goes right back into the first question you just asked. One of the things that I think I equate a lot of my success to is reading. I always have this thought in my head, when someone writes a book, they literally have the best stuff they have in their head, right? Their best stuff they put into that book. And yet we can get that for $20 and $25, a couple, whatever it is. And so people that don't read, I'm like, you are missing out on the cheapest, easiest way to get somebody's best stuff. And I equate a lot of success to that. I'll tell you something else. I'm a fan of Anthony Robbins. I know he changed his name at some point. Sometimes I say Anthony, and people are like, who do you mean? And I remember when I was a kid, back when the cassette tapes, I remember when I was like 13, I got one of those sets, and I used to play it every night when I went to sleep. I lost it, I don't remember when I lost it, 17, 18, 19 years old, and it was put away somewhere. And then when I was moving houses, I found it, and I was like, oh man, I still have this thing, and I popped it into my cassette player, and I played it, and it was so long ago that I had listened to it, and I was amazed that so many things in there were like stuff I say, and I'm like, I didn't make that up. This is where I got it from. I thought it was just me. I thought it was just the way I think. And I was like, no, that wasn't me. That was him. But I played it in my sleep over and over and over again. And I wonder sometimes about how much of my life now is equated to things like that. That I'm constantly. I love listening to stuff like that. I like reading. I like self-help. I like listening and positive things in your life, feeding yourself positivity. And I wonder sometimes, without a time machine, you'll never know, but how much success is attributed to that without you even knowing it.
Yeah, we have two kids, 5 and 7, and that's one of the things that we talk a lot about right now is what is the inner dialogue and the inner monologue that we are giving them by talking to them. And would encourage everybody to kind of think about that if they have younger kids around, like, what are you talking, how are you talking to them, what are you saying, because those are the things that they're going to carry forward in the rest of their life. Our third one is, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
The borrower is slave to the lender. As simple as that. I think about it all the time. You know, I have a vision when I teach, when I do my seminars, and when I teach, I try and put this vision in people's head, and it's Mr. Burns from The Simpsons. You know Mr. Burns?
Yeah.
And I always tell them, I say, you can go to any city in the country and look at the tall buildings, and on the side of the tall buildings, there's bank logos, right? And I try and envision it to them this way to transfer it into their minds. I say, picture Mr. Burns is sitting up there like this, right? And he has us being the conventional landlords and the people in debt running all over the place and filling the property, going to court, if they had to do an eviction, mowing the lawn, fixing the AC unit, doing all this work, collecting the money, and as soon as they get it, they send it on up to him. And he's just sitting here going, run along, right? Send me the money. And in debt, and I'm sure you know this already, Matt, debt is the highest marketed product on the planet. There's more money spent to market you to get into debt than any other product there is. Well, that should tell you something, and it is amazing. And I used to be the opposite. I was the guy that, listen, if they'll finance me, I'll take it. I would walk into a call out, and they'd say, no money down. I'll say, give me 3. And, whatever it was, I was all about it. And it took me getting my butt beat to really change my tune on that. But now I live in a huge house on the water. I have no mortgage. I have no car payments. I have no credit card payments. And I do have some slow flip loans because that's on a 5-year program. But I wish I knew that when I was younger. I wish I believed in it when I was younger, that debt is the enemy. And it sounds all great and it's all sexy on paper. Use other people's money and get rich. But it's all great until it's not. Because again, if you started in 2008, it's been great and it stays great. Right now, it's only been this way. And it may stay that way for another 50 years. That's the whole thing. And if it does, then it's like, okay, well, Scott was wrong. You guys all made a fortune using leverage, which it may, but if it doesn't, I'm too old to start over. I'm not starting over again. So that's kind of where my head's at with that.
Our fourth one is, what are you most proud of in your life?
So, besides, obviously my natural answer is going to be my son and my family. But we didn't get into my past, but I dropped out of school in 11th grade, and I've never been back to school. And I sometimes think about, and I know people still from school, and I sometimes think about the magnitude of what we've accomplished, and I'm like, I'm sometimes beside myself with that. I'm like, it's amazing what we were able to accomplish without any of that degrees or training or certificates on the wall. But ultimately, my son's only 14, so ultimately that's where the focus is on being proud. Although he's still 14, so we don't have the end result just yet.
Yeah, wait 4 more years and ask the question again. Our fifth and final one is, if you could sit down and eat a bowl of ice cream with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Well, this might be a controversial answer. I'm not sure, but it's somebody I really like. And I read his book, which really was eye-opening to me too. I'm going to go with Elon Musk. And I know a lot of people dislike him. A lot of people like him and dislike him. But I really have a lot of respect for him, and I really like. He opens up your mind to thinking bigger than we even think is possible. And I think I would get a lot of value out of that. And if I was able to pick anyone to go have some chunky monkey with, I would probably say it would be him.
2 follow-up questions to that. Do he and Zuck end up fighting? And if so, who wins?
Well, if they end up fighting, and again, we don't watch the news at all in my house. Like we have no news, but I do get through social media, and so I've seen it, but I don't know what's real and what's not. From what I've seen, it looks like it was happening, right? And if it was, I think it would be the highest watched thing ever, and I would watch it myself. And obviously, I would pull for Elon to win. I have a vision in my head of the way Zuck looks, but then I really don't know. But I have to go with Elon winning.
Have you seen Zuck recently?
I did. I just saw one today with MMA fighters, and I was like, oh well. I said, all right, but I have to still pull for Elon. So
yeah, dude's gotten some. He's gotten a little bit of muscle on him, and he's learned how to fight too, it seems like.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, Scott, fantastic conversation. If our listeners wanted to reach out to you, learn more about you, or learn more about the Master Investor Academy, where is the best place we could point them?
I apologize that I completely forgot to share this with you. So I'm giving away to all of your listeners a free copy of The Art of the Slow Flip. So anybody who wants a copy can just go to slowflip.com, slowflip.com, and get a free copy of the book. I have 200 of them printed, ready to go. And so anybody who wants a free copy, just go to slowflip.com and just pay the shipping and handling. I think it's $7.95. Other than that, I am on all social media just under my own name. So I'm on, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and what's the new one now?
Threads.
Threads, yeah. So basically, I'm on all of them under my name, so I'm easy enough to find. I always say, just type in my name into any of them, and it'll pop up.
Perfect. Well, we'll leave some of those in the show notes. And then, Scott, thanks for coming on the show.
All right, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Ice Cream with Investors. If you like what we serve you here, it would mean the world to me if you would like, subscribe, and leave a review on your favorite podcast app.